Hello Avatar fans and welcome to the next episode of the Avatar Online podcast. This is going to be episode 205 of our regular shows. This is the podcast for the fan site, avatarthelastairbender.online.com, and I'm going to be your main host, Morgan Airspeed Prime. Joining me on the podcast is Greg2B from the site.
What's up, everyone?
Excellent. So, on this show, we basically just have a lot of news to cover. A lot of stuff has happened since the last time we did a show. Some of it smaller, some of it on the bigger side of things, but we'll get through it all. So, first up, in terms of, I suppose, just kind of content kind of side of things, stuff we kind of do is related to the site and like my YouTube channel. Legend of Korra Awards voting is now open. So I did the Avatar Awards earlier on in the year, back in January, on my channel, and then we of course did the results show and stuff like that once the voting was complete, and everyone was wondering where's the Korra Awards. Well, the voting has started for them, and we will of course be doing a results show when voting ends. So there's still about a month or so left to vote in that, so I'll basically just refer you guys to a link to the video on YouTube to get the full details on how you go about that, but it's the usual thing. There's 20 or so categories, you know, favorite character, best episode, best book one episode, that sort of thing, covering a lot of ground, only some minor changes compared to the categories in the Avatar ones, and yeah, we'll talk more about that when we pretty much get around to the results of that. But moving on to the first piece of proper news, Faith Erin Hicks and Peter Wortman have both been confirmed as the creative team for the next Avatar comic. I believe Faith Erin Hicks posted this on Instagram. She just mentioned that she was done with, I think it was draft number 3 or 4 of the next Avatar comic, and that she was like looking forward to seeing Peter Wortman draw it. And I think that was as much confirmation as we're going to get before the book is officially announced that they are going to indeed be the creative team. So we already knew Faith Erin Hicks was sticking on board, but this is kind of news for Peter Wortman. So Greg, I don't know, how happy are you for that we're not going to be changing creative team? It's the same one from Imbalance.
No, I think that's pretty good. I think, I think having the consistency always helps as far as these goes, as far as like not having to like start all over with a new creative team and, waiting for them to actually sort of announce that. It did seem like it sort of took a while for them to sort of like, get that info to us, and we're sort of finding it out through like other means. So it's kind of odd that they're doing it that way, but it's definitely good news.
Yeah, I'm definitely happy. I like the creative team from Imbalance. I just hope that the story that they're doing is a little bit more impactful, interesting. But we'll have a little bit of speculation on that in a minute, because we do have some New York Comic Con news. Next piece of news. First up, I suppose, related to the books, the Rise of Kyoshi got its paperback announced. So that was something I was kind of wondering about, like, we haven't really been hearing about that, but we did get the confirmation finally. So the paperback version of Rise of Kyoshi is going to be coming out June 9th, 2020. So that's pretty cool. That might be where maybe the ebook becomes a little bit more available to everyone else, but we'll see how they go about doing that. That's just a nice thing to see the cheaper version of the book, so you don't have to get the big hardcover, but always cool to see that. And then along with that, pretty much at the same time, went up the description for the second Kyoshi novel. So the Shadow of Kyoshi got its description and release date. No cover yet though. So release date for it is going to be July 21st, 2020. And the description, I'll just read it out here and then we can discuss it. So, the epic can't-miss follow-up to the New York Times best-selling Avatar The Last Airbender, The Rise of Kyoshi. Kyoshi's place as the true Avatar has finally been cemented, but at a heavy cost. With her mentors gone, Kyoshi voyages across the 4 nations, struggling to keep the peace. But while her reputation grows, a mysterious threat emerges from the spirit world. To stop it, Kyoshi, Rangi, and their reluctant allies must join forces before the 4 nations are destroyed irreparably. This thrilling follow-up continues Kyoshi's journey from a girl of humble origins to the merciless pursuer of justice, still feared and admired centuries after becoming the Avatar. So the last sentence is something they've kept from the previous description. That's like just their tagline for the Kyoshi series, but the first few bits are new. So I think we roughly knew it was going to be, that's going to be in or around the date, summer ish 2020. That's confirmed. The description obviously is fairly generic right now, but it is interesting to see the focus on the spirit world as the threat. So a lot of people are thinking, okay, this is where they're going to bring Ko and the Karuk stuff into play. Father Glowworm probably coming back into things. But they're definitely setting up some big stakes here with like the four nations destroyed irreparably. Now, they often mention that in comic descriptions and it's a bit over the top, but in this case it could actually be quite big and interesting. So other than that, it's just setting across the idea. She's getting more involved in the politics, going to the different nations, meeting the people, struggling with it a bit. And then a lot of people are very happy to see that Kyoshi and Rangi are going to be together in the book, at least for part of it, especially after the way they sort of dealt with the way they said goodbye and like teasing that they might not get back together or anything like that. So a lot of interesting stuff here. But Greg, what are your thoughts on the description for book 2 of the Kyoshi series?
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely pretty interesting. I like that it has a spirit world. I know we talked about that possibly being a thing with, sort of getting I guess a better idea of sort of what's happened with some of the characters that we don't quite understand yet. So it definitely seems like we're going to be getting more information on that. So I don't know, dealing with the spirit world back then, that definitely seems like something that we don't really know as much about. So it should be cool to see how it was then and sort of compare it to sort of like Korra's time, where we know probably the most information actually about it. So no, it definitely seems like it's interesting. I wonder how sort of like dire the situation really is overall, but really could be. So no, it definitely sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, and then like interesting, like is stuff like no mention of Yoon, even though he's very clearly going to be part of this. But depending on what they reveal about him, he could be like spirit world related, depending on what they say has happened to him. Other interesting thing is here right now they're listing the page count as being 368, which is obviously a lot less. It's like about 100 pages less than the actual book, but more than likely that will change before the book comes out because it's still in the process of being written. So I think we saw this with the first book. It went from like I think just under 400 pages to being nearly 500 by the time it was confirmed to. The information was confirmed, so the page count will likely change. I doubt it's going to be that big of a difference between the two books, but it's something worth keeping an eye out on. And then, yeah, interesting that they put the description up with no cover, but the first book, it was all kind of announced at the same time, so that could be something to look out for at New York Comic Con. They might have that to reveal. Next piece of information kind of almost came out of nowhere. Like, it has actually been a while since we've heard about anything new with the Avatar Funko Pops. Now we're finally getting some of that information. So first up, kind of leaked announcements, because these are all exclusive, so they tend to come out first. First up is a 6-inch Appa Funko Pop, exclusive to Box Lunch, and it's also flocked, so it's kind of fuzzy. It's got a little bit of a kind of fabricy texture to it. They've done this with some of the other Funko Pops in the past, and Appa's getting that treatment. This is exactly what I kind of wanted them to do, because the Appa that we have already is very small, and it looks like pretty much just his back half has just been chopped off to make into like a smaller figure. So it seems like they're taking the same core design that they have and just making it the size it probably should have been in the first place. So that's really fun to see. And then along with that, also a Box Lunch exclusive, is going to be this Appa Funkos cereal, where inside it you get a miniature Funko Pop of Appa, which I think is just the same design as the current one we already have. So 2 Appa Funko Pop exclusives for Box Lunch, 6-inch, and then a very small one. What are your thoughts on this as being the first thing since the first wave was announced?
Yeah, no, I mean it's definitely interesting. I don't know. I didn't really expect it, and I don't know much at all about Box Lunch, so to see that that's how it's going to work, and just the whole idea of it being included in this sort of like exclusive serial type thing. I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, it's cool that we're going to get it in general. I wonder if it'll be, somewhere you can buy it, other way. I guess I kind of doubt it, but I don't know. I think it's interesting for people who are going to sort of get this.
Yeah, and more than likely with this, because it's like a flocked one, there more than likely will be a standard 6-inch Appa as well. That's just obviously made of the vinyl or plastic, whatever. That won't be an exclusive. But again, we're waiting to see on that. Usually with Funkos, the standard retail ones are the ones to be announced like last almost. So yeah, I'm definitely interested in the 6-inch Appa. I do hope it gets a more standard release, so it's not difficult to get. Because I definitely would like to have a proper kind of big Appa to go with the figures I have already. Um, Next up is I suppose we'll continue the trend of Funko Pops here and go into the New York Comic Con exclusive Funko Pop, which was announced, and that is going to be the Cabbage Merchant, and his Cabbage cart is going to be a New York Comic Con 2019 exclusive, and specifically noted here on the little sticker, first edition is what they're calling it. So again, outside of the picture, it's pretty much all they've said. Like I don't even think they specifically refer to him as Cabbage Merchant by name, at least in the tweet or anything like that. It's just new exclusive avatar figure from the official Funko Pop account. And pretty much the blog article that it goes to, I believe, is literally just the picture and the basic description. Yeah. Oh, they do say Cabbage Man and Cart. Okay, so that's what they call it, Cabbage Man and Cart. Yeah, and they obviously note here quantities are going to be limited, sold on a first come first served basis. Attending the convention does not guarantee availability. I suppose first of all, I think this is a great idea. This is a really fun pop. It's one that I think a lot of people want, and even people who aren't into collecting lots of them, I think are going to have an interest in getting this, because it's like the first ever, actually second ever piece of Cabbage Merchant merchandise, because he had a card in the trading card game. But yeah, so this is fun. Like immediately, I think every fan wants a copy of this, but it's the biggest exclusive so far in terms of probably being the most difficult to get, at least from my experience of like looking at Funko Pops from previous convention exclusives. So the eBay prices I think are going to be insane for this until they potentially announce if they're doing more with this, because the fact that it says first edition probably means it's mainly being sold early at the convention, or that like a different version of this, maybe just the Cabbage Man without the cart might be sold as like a standard retail product. But what are your thoughts on this cool item?
I think it's definitely really cool that they're coming out with it. I mean, it seems like something that they would have like thought of like making like eons ago, or maybe not eons ago, but just like a while ago, because Cabbage Merchant just is one of those fun characters that even in Korra's time they made throwback references to it. So clearly, people know that it has like an interest. That it has like a following, just the character in general. Like there's a couple Avatar characters that they could probably do that with that would work out pretty well, but the Cabbage Merchant is definitely number one on that list. But yeah, I mean, as far as like getting this at New York Comic Con, it's not something that I would even attempt to even get, and I'll be there, and like I've gone to like things like super early and stuff like that, but I know from past experience, like I remember, I don't know, maybe it was like a couple years ago, like there was like a dedicated line to get into Funko Pops even before the convention opened, and it was just like a sideline. Like you didn't even, I don't know, it's really, really hard. You have to be really, really committed to getting just that, and that might be like your whole morning. So it's definitely cool. I mean, I guess the resale value will be really high, so it might be worth it if you can get it from that perspective. And no, it's definitely, for me personally, it's definitely, I'm not a big Funko Pop person. I have like a couple, but this would be one that I probably would want to get rather than any of the other characters, because I feel like if you get the other characters, then you have to be like really like those characters. But this is like generic enough that you can just be a fan of the show and you would want to get this. So I can see why many people would want to get it, including myself. But the hoops that you would have to go through getting this at the actual convention, I don't know, it's a lot.
Yeah, this thing is just like, it's pure kind of meme value is really the reason I think most people want it.
Yeah.
It's the biggest meme from Avatar. Everyone knows it. I think even if they did like some sort of a like cactus juice Sokka, it wouldn't have the same appeal as just the Cabbage Merchant with a cart full of cabbages. Especially if it's packaged really like uniquely. With like we probably will have to say my cabbages somewhere on it. It could be pretty fun as like a diorama almost. But yeah, this is one I'm almost just as excited to see it in person, just see someone like look at it in person, as I am just to see the eBay prices of just how much are people going to be selling this for. Because like apart from like the obviously the exclusives we've had already, was like GameStop for Azula, and then oh god, I don't even remember where the other Aang was from initially, but the eBay prices for them was only like it wasn't even twice the price. So like the standard
Hmm.
Funko Pop's like about 15 or so. The Azula I think was primarily selling on eBay for like 25 ish. At
Oh,
least
that's not too
that's what I
bad.
paid for mine. And then the Ang one I think went for a very similar price because I think it was a little bit more available. Obviously not the glow in the dark crazy one that I don't even know what the price of that was. But this is likely going to be probably at least 30 just to get it if you're at the convention and get it officially, just because it's like a standard Funko Pop plus a pretty big accessory. The price, I don't know, over 200 at least is my prediction initially. Did you have any idea about what are your predictions for how much this will end up going for?
Yeah, no, I have no idea. I mean, no, I don't even know.
And then, what's your take on the fact that it specifically says Comic Con First Edition? What do you think that means for a secondary release or altered release in some way?
Yeah, no, that definitely makes me wonder if it's just sort of like this is the first run or if this is literally like going to be like a first edition exclusive. I don't know, because that's interesting that they actually have that on. I don't know. I don't know if I've seen that on other ones, so that's definitely interesting to see how they're going to sort of market this in the future.
Yeah, because the thing then becomes obviously like, what is the exclusive? Is it going to be the packaging for it? I'd be perfectly fine if they just released him without the Cabbage cart, because he's still holding a Cabbage, the actual figure. So, and I think that would be exactly kind of what you want. Um, or what? Like, there's going to be a lot of intrigue about this, especially if the prices do end up getting exceptionally high, and if I kind of know the kind of collecting kind of market the way I do, I get the impression likely very few fans are probably going to get their hands on this. It will primarily be people looking to resell it,
Yeah.
more than likely. So there probably will be some demand for a actual release of this. And just the fact that the news we've covered here, we've covered like three exclusive items. I assume this probably means we're going to get the announcement of like a second wave of Avatar figures towards convention time, getting closer to the event. Um, Otherwise, it's kind of like, are they really just doing a big Appa and a Cabbage merchant for exclusives and nothing else? Do you think this means we're gonna be hearing about like the next wave coming up next?
I would think so. It seems like they have it in like the production sort of mindset right now. So it seems like this would be like a good time to at least announce them, if not have like stuff ready to go already and they just haven't said anything.
Yeah, and then like immediately the speculation is like, okay, what characters are they doing? Because the first wave actually covered most of the main cast. You kind of be probably looking for Ozai as the main villain, Suki of some sort you'd want, Mei Tai Li. After that, it's like Roku, some of the other avatars, and beyond that, you're probably stretching into more the kind of more minor characters who you're like question if they'd maybe sell as well type thing. Um, it's gonna be interesting, but like I can see a value in just like a wave that is like the Cabbage Merchant, like Ozai, like Suki, and maybe like book three Katara and book three Aang or something like that. Like because they're gonna probably step into doing that stuff as well, different outfits for different characters because they always do that. Do you have any brief predictions for what you'd want to see for the next wave of the Funkos?
I don't know. I mean, I like the ones that they did come out with the first wave. I think there could be some room to go with some different outfits or different accessories, just because I think that might be more appealing. But I think yes, I think second tier characters, some of the villains, I think is always. I think probably the villains I think would be the cool thing to see. I mean, depending on how popular they are, they may sell better or not, but I think that would definitely be cool to have those, just to have like, like the full set of like, the main set of characters from any one season, I think could be really cool.
Yeah, and then definitely book three Zuko, just because the book one Zuko we have is going to look so different to that one,
Mm-hmm.
and people much prefer his later design. And then I think after that you're probably looking at like they probably should do Korra ones at some point, at least covering the main core cast would be interesting. and some of those characters I think would have a lot of appeal. Of like an Amon Funko Pop, I think would look really really good and stuff like that. But yeah, we'll cover any news on future Funko Pops when we get it. Next up, also New York Comic Con, we have the announcement of the panel for New York Comic Con. So it's going to be called Water, Earth, Fire, Air, Continuing the Avatar Legacy. It's going to be Saturday, October 5th, from 11:15 to 12:15, New York time, of course, room 1A21 in the Javits Center. The description, pause me if you've heard this one before. Dark Horse Comics, Abrams Books, and Nickelodeon are thrilled to treat fans to a panel worthy of Aang himself. Join Avatar: The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra contributors for a further exploration of the beloved world. Fans will also have an opportunity to showcase their knowledge of the elements in a fun trivia competition for awesome prizes. That's pretty much word for word identical to the San Diego Comic-Con description. And right now, the only confirmed guest is FC on the panel. But likely, I suppose they're maybe just waiting to see if Peter Wortman or Faith Erin Hicks is going to be there, if Mike O'Brien's going to be there, Gene Yang, those type of people you usually expect to be on the panel. And then, I suppose especially like Michelle Wong, if potentially she would be there, that'd be pretty interesting. But again, it's still early-ish yet. There's still like a while to go until the convention itself. But any thoughts on this? I know there's not a lot to say because we pretty much realized the description means very little. But any thoughts on your excitement level for this?
I don't know. We go through this like every year it seems, and it's like, oh, it could be really cool, or it could really be not much of anything. Especially with the description being, verbatim, pretty much what it was before. I mean, it's in the same room as it almost always is. I think. Was it the same time last time? I think it might have been the same exact time last time or similar time. So I don't know. I mean, I don't see why I won't go to it just because I guess at this point, but I don't know. It might not be anything like super amazing. I mean, what are we thinking? Like the book cover? I mean, something with FCE would be the coolest thing that would probably come just because we know that he's confirmed as of now to go to it. But with all the other stuff in the preview pages that we do have, I don't know how much more they're going to show of something else. I don't know.
Yeah, because I went back and I actually watched a video of the San Diego Comic-Con panel from obviously this year, just a few months ago. And it was very dull apart from one or two of the questions that were asked. But even then, it got the typical answers of kind of important questions like, will you ever tell the Iroh Spirit World story? And Mike's just like, that'd be fun, maybe, like just super non-committal, like we'll maybe find some way, as if like he doesn't know that everyone wants that story type thing. And then probably the biggest one was just like, is there any way for Korra to get the past lives back? And his answer was just like, it was pretty much just shrugged his shoulders and said, I don't know. Like he just didn't want to answer that question at all. And then I think probably the most interesting question from the entire panel was someone just asked about Azula, basically. Are we going to see more Azula stuff? And I think Gene Yang spoke first and just said that, like, oh yeah, I wrote Azula, I enjoyed writing Azula, but Azula fans are different. They're crazy. They demand her to be written in a certain way. And I think Faith Erin Hicks spoke up and said that she got one email that was sort of aggressively worded, like demanding if she ever writes Azula that she be written in a specific way, and she's kind of afraid to write Azula now, which I thought was kind of insightful, just to get that, like, oh, like I doubt they're making decisions based off one email, but there's a slight kind of anyone writing the characters, like they kind of want to stay away from Azula a little bit for reasons, but yeah, like most of the early stages of the panel were like they barely talked about the books. Like the panel moderator was just there, like, these are the people. Here are my really basic questions towards them. Kind of show like preview pages we've already seen in the background. Like made no real effort to like overly advertise the books coming out or touch on news. So I'm expecting it to be the same here, but as usual with New York Comic Con, it's all about, like, will we get the big news article coming out the week before, like that's happened the last 2 or 3 years? because at this point we're expecting it, because like we know there is another Avatar comic, we know the creative team, it's the same creative team, we know they're on like draft 4 or 5 or something like that. It seems like the ideal time to announce what's next for Avatar comics, and if they have anything more to say, like I'd be perfectly fine with them announcing what's next for Korra comics as well, plus if they have anything else to say. And I think if that happens before, then they might have more to say at the panel, because they can go a little bit more in on, here's our plans for the next story or something like that. And I'm not really sure. Because it's been a long time since any of the panels themselves have been particularly newsworthy. I think the last time we actually got 100% like this is news from the panel was, I think, a library edition cover being revealed. So I don't really have high hopes for the panel itself being the source of news. So it's pretty much just hope that someone asks a good question and they're willing to answer it, kind of type thing. But I know you've more experience being in the room at these things. You even had like the Nickelodeon questionnaire to the audience that they haven't done anything with.
Yeah, no, I mean, like you said, usually most of the news does come up before. I mean, when they do the actual panels, there's not much extra special that's really there. At least not in recent years. At least there hasn't been that much more. But I don't know. I mean, it seems like we're getting more and more stuff coming out, so they have the potential to actually have more stuff, which is probably why I still go to them even in the first place. But I mean, as far as actually being there and experiencing it, I mean, it's definitely a cool experience for the most part, I think. At least it was initially, but I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, I don't know. It really depends on who they have there. Like, if they have the right people there that can actually answer questions and they're willing to go with it, then it usually turns out better for those cases.
And then now that I'm remembering it, there wasn't actually a trivia at the San Diego Comic-Con panel. What they did was that they just gave prizes to the people who got a chance to ask a question.
Yeah,
So,
they've done that at the New York ones too.
yeah, so I think it's been a while since they've done trivia. I know it's kind of weird, because like if they do trivia, it feels like that's just like they're completely wasting time, because then it's more on the people at the panel rather than the like panelists kind of presenting anything. Um, so the only hope I think for this would be that the Rise of Kyoshi at the point New York Comic Con happens will have been out a while. Maybe he'll be more willing to talk about it from a kind of more spoilery kind of point of view, assuming most people have read it and they can go a little bit more in depth on that. Because I didn't find that he had a lot to say at the San Diego Comic Con panel. And I think that might come down to just the moderator and the questions that were being asked. It was the sort of classic, who's your favorite character, who's your favorite character to write, but not going in too much depth type thing. So yeah, unfortunately, I just get the impression this is going to be another kind of very, very skippable one unless something happens beforehand. But yeah, New York Comic Con, it pretty much just means we hope for a news article to come out from like comic book resources. But yeah, we'll move from there into I suppose the last section of news, which will be more of the discussion focused stuff, and that is preview pages. We have loads of preview pages from pretty much all of the next 3 books coming out. So obviously first up, October 1st is going to be Imbalance Part 3, then combination release date October 2nd and October 15th, Team Avatar Tales, and then I think it's November 12th at this point for Runes of the Empire Part 2. Preview pages for all of them. So I think we'll start off with the Imbalance Part 3 preview. Now, we've discussed the main preview that came out already, so we're not going to go too in-depth on this. Mainly just get across the idea that this is the Google preview that's come out, so you might have heard some kind of hype about that, because whenever the Google preview comes out, we usually get a lot of pages from the book and can usually figure out pretty much exactly the way the story plays out, and it's happened again this time out. Through manipulating this from like different regions and changing the google.ie to .com and stuff like that, you can get tons of different pages, and it doesn't cover everything, and that I think it seems like pretty much all the time there's usually a group of about 20 or so pages that like you pretty much just don't get any preview pages from. So this time out, I think it's about 30 to 50. I haven't seen any of them, but most of the rest of the pages I've seen them. So when I open up the preview, it obviously defaults to google.ie because I'm from Ireland. I get to see pretty much the first 22 pages of the book, excluding the first page of content, which is page 5. But we got that from a different preview, so we've already have that. So I get page 6 to 21 in the standard Irish preview. If I open up the same preview in Firefox, I get like page 6 to 18, and then like 3 of the last, 5 pages of the book type thing. So it's all over the place with what happens. What pages did you get when you opened it up, Greg?
Yeah, it's weird because if you do the IE one, then you get those sets of ones. But if I do the .com, then I actually get, which ones do I get more? I actually get more than what I thought I had. I get like 21 to like 24, which I didn't have in the other one, as well as I think the earlier ones are all pretty much the same as what you mentioned. Yeah, so I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, and then like you changed to some of the different ones. Like this time actually I went to google.it, so Italy, and I actually got a bunch of different pages that like featured Suki on it, when the previous pages I've seen hadn't really featured much of her. And then I went to another one and I got like one of the other final pages of the book. So like, if you manipulate it enough, you pretty much get most of it, but you do begin to notice that there are sort of specific groups of pages that don't seem to appear anywhere. So a lot of the sort of middle section of the book is kind of missing, but you can still piece it together from what's going on, because depending on what way you go to, it'll often have like the first core of the book, then like 2 pages from the 20s, 2 pages from the 30s, and then 2 pages from the end. But yeah, you can figure out a decent amount of what's going on here. I'm still excited to get the book and read it in like full context and so on, but I think the previews just made me realize like it's just that the Imbalance, I think, is sort of limited in scope of what it was trying to do. I think it's going to be fun. I think the art looks good, and for the most part, the writing seems really well done. It's just it's not overly impressive compared to I think what some of the previous comics have done. But I'm hoping that there's still a little bit more depth to come from some of the pages we haven't quite seen. But yeah, anything you want to mention from what you've seen of the larger preview here?
Not particularly. I mean, I think I don't know. It seems pretty interesting the way that they're going with it for this, for this last sort of book here. So I think it's definitely, worth reading. I think, I guess in the grander scheme of things, it's definitely sort of like toned down. So that's sort of the only downside. But I think it actually, I don't know, it seems like they're doing enough interesting things, at least from, looking at the previews. It's enough to get you interested in actually reading the full story and the full context.
Yeah. In a way, like after the preview, like the thing I'm actually most excited for now that I sort of know what's happening in the book is just to see the full scope of the Rue character arc in part 3. You get to see little pieces of it in the previews, and I want to see the full description of that. It seems like they're going at least a little bit into the family's history to give some context to what's going on, and I'm interested to see the stuff that we didn't see. But yeah, that's Imbalance. That book is out in just a few weeks, so this will be the first one when the books actually come out. We'll get around to reviewing. Second up is like the day afterwards, technically, like comic book store release date for Team Avatar Tales is the day after the main release of Imbalance. Team Avatar Tales. It's fair to say the excitement for this book has dropped drastically since it was first given a date and first announced. And at this point, I think a lot of people just barely know that this book even exists, kind of at this point. But thanks to this preview, we have a better sense, I suppose, for what is and is not in the book. So, in one of the previews here, I think this preview came out, I think it was a newsletter that Dark Horse sent out if you subscribe to their email. Someone sent it to me, that's why I have the link to it here. It includes as a preview page the table of contents for the book. And I think it's the full table of contents because the book is only like 72 pages, so I doubt there's more. But it shows us how many stories are in the book, page counts, and like full creative team type things. So In order, this is the the way the books line up in this one. So Rebound, our first Free Comic Book Day book here, reprinted here, is the first book. Second up is a new story called The Substitute. Third is Free Comic Book Day book Shells. After that, number 4 is Sokka's Poem. After that, the fifth story is Toph and the Boulder. 6 is a story called Origami. 7 is the last Free Comic Book Day book, Sisters, and then 8 is The Scarecrow. So yeah, there's only 8 stories in the book. 3 of them we have seen already because of Free Comic Book Day. We've seen all of Sokka's Poem because they released that as preview pages like a year ago. Toph and the Boulder, they released as preview pages from New York Comic Con last year, so we've seen basically all of that. Through these preview pages here, we see, I think, all but the last 2 pages of The Substitute. We see 1 page of Origami and 1 page of The Scarecrow. But Origami seems to only be like 5 pages long, and The Scarecrow is realistically only at most 10, 12 pages long. So we've seen pretty much all but like maybe 15 pages at most from this book. And I don't think it looks very good. Obviously, that's taking out the fact that 3 of the books are reprints, and I do think the 3 best stories are the reprint stories, Sisters, Rebound, and Shells. I'm not seeing anything that overly interests me from any of the other stories here. But Greg, just based off the table of contents and the little bits from the preview that we see, what's your take on what this book is offering here as a collection of stories?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weak. I mean, I don't know. I mean, like you said, it's not really, since some of the books we've clearly have already seen, and the other ones we either have like almost nearly the full sort of preview of them, or we know at least a little bit about them depending on when they've come out. I don't know. It definitely doesn't seem. I mean, the hype level for this was already sort of like killed like months ago or however long ago. So that's just sort of unfortunate thing of just how the production of this sort of went through. But regardless of that, I think it's not a lot in it, unfortunately.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about some of the new stories that we do get to see. So first up in the book is The Substitute, which is one of the ones they focus mainly on in the preview. We get to see the first bunch of pages here from it. It seems like my best take on The Substitute is that this feels like it was already done as a comic in The Lost Adventures. Like the core idea of this story, I think, is the Wang Fire story from The Lost Adventures, where Sokka actually gets like, oh, you said you're a Fire Nation soldier, you actually have to be a soldier, and he does the whole death of Wang Fire thing. This just seems like that, except he puts on a different mustache and gets recognized as a teacher instead of an actual soldier. And it's just this weird thing of like, Aang and Sokka want snacks, so he has to go out in disguise even though they're already in disguise. It's really unclear like why there has to be like a second layer of disguises type thing. And we end the preview with, okay, he's discovered as a teacher, he's going to have to be a teacher to a group of disobedient Fire Nation children, and there's like 2-3 pages to see what happens next. I just feels really uninspired to me. I think the art is nice. Don't know if I'd want it for a full comic series, but it's nice to see for just a few pages. What are your thoughts on The Substitute?
Yeah, no, it definitely seems like sort of a side quest to something that we've already sort of seen before. I mean, it definitely seems like, it's a fun story of Sokka just being, himself. So that's always sort of like fun and entertaining to see. But as far as it just sort of being one of the stories that are just part of this overall, it doesn't seem like it's, that amazing or anything like that. It just seems like a nice little random side story that it fits in, and yeah, it's something that happened along their sort of journey, but other than that there's not much to it.
Yeah, and then it also kind of goes against what I felt was the sort of idea of this book to be a collection of stories that take place after the end of the series, yet it's clear that a couple of these take place during the series, and I thought the idea was that wasn't meant to be the case, but clearly they've allowed some leeway here, but we'll move on. Second up, Sokka's poem. We've seen this one before. Like I said, I think it was like April last year we got the 2 preview pages for this because it's only a 2-page story. The main idea here is that this is the first Avatar comic with art by Gene Yang. It's actually written by someone else, colored by someone else, but the art and letters are by Gene Yang. And it just seems, I think we talked about this when it happened, and it's just like, it's just a very basic recap of Sokka. I don't think it says much. It's just, here's some things that have happened to Sokka, said in a poem which kind of fits the whole idea of him rhyming and stuff like that at times. That's really all there is to say about it. Do you have any thoughts on Sokka's poem?
No, not much.
Yeah. And then Toffin the Boulder was the one that we got most of the pages from New York Comic Con. I actually think you're the source on most of those pages, if I remember correctly. So you probably get to see these kind of pretty much first in a way, almost within the fandom. And I think that this is at least fun. I like the idea of like the Boulder, a more minor character coming back into things. He's paired up with a character who fits into his story. You add an extra layer onto his life. While again, I don't think it's that impressive of a story, it's at least, fun using a character that we don't know much about of the Boulder, which is I think is something to say compared to the other stories in the book. But do you have any thoughts on the Toph and the Boulder?
Yeah, no, I don't know. It's a fun sort of side story. I don't know, maybe just because of how the characters sort of interact from what we know of it. It seems like that one has more of a sort of a fun sort of place to it as far as like being a random story than compared to some of the other ones that we know of. Regardless, this still doesn't have any sort of like huge bearing on anything overall, but at least it seems like it's entertaining at least.
Yeah, the story that we actually know the least about, I think, is this one here, Origami. So it's written, illustrated, and lettered by Kiku Hughes. And I think by process of elimination, the page from this story that we have is this one that appears to be set back during book 1. And what happens here is there's an Earth Kingdom man in the ground, Fire Nation soldier is there, Katara comes in, does some water bending, Momo jumps up on the guy, Aang and Sokka arrive to see that Katara's just done something here, and they're like, did we miss something? Not much. I think it's only a 5-page story. I don't really see from this page how it fits the idea of Origami, unless this Earth Kingdom guy, which seems to be our sort of character for the story almost, is doing origami in some way. I can't piece it together just from the one page, but I actually do like the art here, and I actually like the panel layout and the way it's done, with the kind of white and just the kind of simple kind of look of it. But what are your thoughts on this one, Origami?
Yeah, no, I do agree that the artwork on this one definitely stands out compared to the other ones, which are more your sort of like traditional sort of comic frame layout. This one definitely seems like it has a different flow to it, how, some of the elements are overlapping sort of the boundaries of the actual sort of framing elements here. So that part of it seems pretty cool. It's too bad that this is probably one that might seem the most interesting and is probably one of the shorter ones.
Yeah, and just especially just like, we're back in book 1. For some reason, like there's a lot of opportunity in book 1 for just like random stories along the way, but it was definitely odd to come to this and just see like, whoa, it's the characters back in those outfits. I suppose it could be book 2 at some point as well. Last story in the book is called The Scarecrow, and I think this, again, by process of elimination, and I think what the back cover of the book says about something about pumpkins, a story involving pumpkins, it has to be this page that we get here, where we see Toph, Momo, Aang, Sokka, and Katara in, I assume, is a pumpkin patch with a farmer, and he wants someone to act as his scarecrow, and there's a joke about, oh, Momo is a monster, there's a monster eating my pumpkins, and Aang's just defending Momo. It is pretty cute. The art style is very, 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 very cartoony. In that, like, I definitely wouldn't want to see this art style for a full comic, but it's nice for what seems to be just a very kind of humor-focused story where, I don't know, likely Sokka's probably going to get dressed up as a scarecrow given the title of the story or something like that. Aang holding like Momo like a baby is pretty cool. But yeah, it seems to be one of the longer stories in the book as well. So this might actually have a bit of a story to it. I'm going to assume the monster is probably some sort of animal of note, and I hope it's a new animal. That could be something cool from the book. But what are your thoughts on what we see of the Scarecrow from the preview?
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice sort of, one of those funny sort of humorous stories, like you said. Just, from the style alone, you can tell it's sort of gonna go that sort of route here. So, no, I think at least it's something that's sort of new and unique. I think is probably cool, even if it's not anything sort of really big overall.
hmm And yeah, that's pretty much what we know about it so far. Like I said, there's probably just over 10 pages of this book that we haven't seen through different stages of previews, and the fact that like a good pretty much close to half of the book is reprints. And honestly, at this point, I think the fact just getting those books, those three free comics reprinted here is probably the biggest allure of getting this book for me, just to have a physical copy of those books, because they were difficult to get if you didn't have a ideal comic book store location nearby or anything like that. And they definitely stand out as being so much more important than everything else, and that the preview that they link in their news article, their newsletter, includes most of Rebound, or it might actually be all of Rebound, and it feels so important because it's like a lead into one of the other comics, and it's addressing like Mei and Zuko's relationship and introducing Kalo as a character. And then you cut to like the second one, and it's like Sokka with a mustache that is not the mustache that people care about, and it's like, what are we doing here? Next up, though, is I think something we can really get into a lot of detail on, and that is the Runes of the Empire Part 2 preview. This one's come out a bit early, considering we just got the preview pages for Team Avatar Tales just there, but we actually have a good few pages of this here. I think we have 16 overall. 8 of them come from this website, doomrocket.com, that seemed to get the exclusive for it this time out. And then Edelweiss also put up 8 pages. So, yeah, we'll actually go a bit in depth on these. So, let's go through this. So, first page here, we have Wu getting onto Naga, actually. And he's bringing bug spray with him because Wu and Korra are going on Naga into the swamp to find Toph, which was the setup from the very end of Runes of the Empire Part 1. Toph is their ideal candidate to go up against Guan in the election in Gaoling. What are your thoughts on this? I didn't quite expect Wu to be used in this way, but I actually really like the way they do it over the course of these pages.
Yeah, no, I think it is really good to actually use Wu to sort of get someone to sort of do this. And no, I mean, even though he doesn't have like, obviously he doesn't have the best way about sort of doing things in general, but I think, if they're going to make use of him, I mean, he still seems like his same sort of core sort of character. He's just, he's trying to do the right thing. So no, I think it's kind of cool how they're using him for sure.
Yeah, and as they go off, we see that they're being watched from a distance through binoculars by some Earth Empire soldiers, so obviously Guan's forces. So they're being spied on. And then we go into the airship here, and we see the, I suppose, engineer slash pilot talking to Asami. They're ready for takeoff, and Asami and Kuvira get a little bit of a chance to talk. I don't suppose you're going to let me out of here? Not until we arrive in Zaofu. Sue told me she has a nice cell waiting for you. And Kuvira just notes, terrific, I'll get to trade 1 platinum prison for another. And this is when she's informed that the engines won't start. So, sabotage, as Asami wonders, they were fine, they were working on the way here, what's going on here? Kuvira begins to say that I think I might know why you're having trouble. How would you know that? I suggest you let me out of here now. And of course they're questioning why she's saying stuff but not what she needs to say to convince them. Earth Empire soldiers come in, kind of rappelling through the windows. The glass shatters all over the place. Kuvira screams out, "That's why!" And we get this pretty cool fight scene here, where we get to see that Mako can actually firebend with his injured arm. important piece of information there. Bolin on an airship, of course, doesn't have any earth to bend, so he grabs a chair and starts hitting people with that. So I actually really like this kind of action scene here. Just it seems really fun, but also serious with what's going on with the plot. And obviously, given some of the preview pages we get later on, it gives us a sense of like, oh, this gets worse from here rather than better, even though it seems like our characters have this covered. But what are your thoughts on these couple of pages?
Yeah, no, I think this is definitely a cool way to sort of start this up. I mean, it's, I don't know, I guess it's interesting just to see Kuvira still being as cryptid as she is, even though, she could have clearly just said, what was going to happen. But no, I think it's definitely a cool sort of fight bit here, even though we can, pretty much assume what's going to happen later on eventually.
Yep. And from there we actually cut to a different, obviously, Wu and Korra arriving in the swamp at the kind of tree section where the little kind of cave kind of area where Toph lives. And they go in. Wu's wondering, maybe she's moved on. But Toph knows that she's in here because she saw her through the vines. So she used her kind of spirit sensing ability through the vines to sense where Toph was. Wu walks past a wall as he notices that there's actually a face in the wall. And it turns out that it was Toph hanging out in the wall trying to hide, and she curses Korra and her avatar powers, and she calls funny moment for Toph here with the nicknames. Who's Spindleshanks over here, referring to Wu, and he's introduced as King Wu, and he says it's an honor, and she just says no offense, but I've never been a fan of the monarchy, and he just says understood, ma'am. So that's pretty much it for the preview there. We just end with pretty much Wu meeting Toph primarily, and that Wu is here to try and convince Toph to join the election. But definitely fun. I suppose I was almost expecting them to get to this a little later in the book, but I like that it seems to be happening quite early on, that they immediately go for Toph, and Korra being away allows something bad to happen with the rest of the crew to basically set up the whole brainwashing kind of plot that we're going for here. But what are your thoughts on this Toph pages here at the end?
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely a nice setup. I mean, Toph is sort of, she always acts her own sort of particular way. So the fact that they have her, so well in character here, I think it's definitely cool. So it's definitely going to be a fun sort of interaction between Wu and Toph.
Yeah, and we actually get some of that from the Edelweiss preview pages, which feature more of this. Now, clearly there's some pages that happen in between what we were just talking about and these pages, because the Korra just opens up with, what do you say? Governor Toph Beifong has a nice ring to it, don't you think? So they've clearly told her about what's happened, but we don't get to see the details on that. Sounds like this Guan character is a real piece of work. I'd like to put a guy like him in his place. So it's a yes, it's a no. And her explanation is quite interesting here. And Katara and Sokka lived for all that political hoo-ha. Me, I always saw government as a giant pool of mud. Anyone who falls into it is going to come out filthy. Count me out. And it said here, which is what makes you perfect for the job. You'll tell it like it is. You're incorruptible. If you haven't noticed, I hate being around people. What makes you think I want to be of service to them? Korra says, but don't you want to make a positive difference in Gaoling? It's your home state. I despise growing up there. Wu gets all sad and says, I think it was a mistake coming here, Korra. Maybe Auntie Hu Ting was right after all. And this seems to spark something in Korra. That's it. Wu wait. She whispers something that we don't get to see to him behind Toph's back. And Toph is like, what are you whispering about over there? So what are your thoughts on these two pages?
This looks like this is pretty interesting because, I mean, we know that somehow they get, Toph with her just because of what happens later on, but we don't know how exactly. So I don't know. I think it's interesting that there's something that his aunt said that sort of sparked an idea in Korra. I wonder what it is. And, I'm guessing it was probably negative compared to what they're trying to do now. So it's going to be interesting to see how they use that to sort of get Toph to go with them.
Yeah, because obviously Toph has to know the Queen is dead. Because she makes some comment about it, I think, doesn't she, at some point? Maybe it's not her, but she knows. So what is it that Wu knows that Hu Ting said to him that sparks something in Korra? it's very interesting because, like you say, the next preview pages that we see is Toph on Naga. Then it's clearly not the next page because something's happened in between. But we obviously, I think, get the explanation in that they're stopped in the middle of the road here. Wu, stay put. Toph, I might need some backup. You got it. And there's an Earth Empire soldier in a truck in the middle of the road, and Korra says, "I'm not going anywhere with one of Guan's lackeys. I'm no lackey, and it's Kuvira." And obviously, like having these like out of context sequences, like not knowing what's happened in between pages. This is like, wait, Kuvira was just in a platinum prison like pages ago apparently, but now here she is on her own in a car. How did this happen? And it helps to explain to us, oh, this is why she's on the cover in that outfit for part 2. So, okay, this explains it. Immediately, Korra's like, where are Asami, Mako, and Bolin? I'll explain everything, but we need you to get off the road before someone spots us. Guan's at the airfield waiting to ambush you, and Korra attacks her because she wants the answers. I warned you if you hurt my friends, I would take you down. I didn't harm them, I swear. So where are they, and why are you wearing that uniform? And it seems like Korra's doing a pretty interesting firebending move where she's kind of like holding like a U of fire around the front of Kuvira. We don't often see firebenders like kind of hold fire away from them kind of in place like that. So this is actually fairly cool to see kind of Korra do something like that. But it clearly suggests the idea that the fight that we just saw, Asami, Mako, Bolin, they end up losing it and might actually have to free Kuvira to get someone out. So I really want to know how that actually plays out. But what are your thoughts on this confrontation with Kuvira here?
Yeah, no, I mean, without the whole sort of middle context, it is kind of hard to see, but, something went down and Kuvira was able to get out, and this is sort of the situation that they're in right now here. So, yeah, no, I mean, I don't know, it's always sort of hard for Korra to sort of trust Kuvira in any sort of sense as far as everything that's gone, especially when she's tried to help her before. So, this is definitely interesting to see. And yeah, the whole idea of this sort of fire ring around her that's being held is definitely an interesting way to sort of hold someone, I guess, sort of in place. But I guess, it makes sense as far as like another element that might work. And Korra does seem to favor fire a lot.
Mm-hmm. And next we cut to a page that it actually could be a good bit later on in the book, but they already set up the idea that like Sue was waiting for them, so I don't really know exactly how long it is, but either way, Opal runs out of the ship along with Wei and Wing and Sue, and they're obviously happy to see Grandma Toph. Too bad it's not under better circumstances. We see a full panel shot here of just Sue and Kuvira walking past each other, no words said, which is very, very telling, and Sue just goes to talk to Korra. What are you waiting for? As we also see that Wu has Pabu, and Pabu was with Bolin back when the fight was going on. So clearly, along the way, Kuvira ended up picking up Pabu somehow along the way. Whether or not Bolin gave him to her or just he tagged along, it is interesting that Pabu has ended up here. And it makes sense. Wu actually is good with animals, so that's why Pabu would be fine being held by him. So some pretty cool stuff there. Korra just says, you go. I'm not leaving without Asami, Mako, and Bolin. And she walks down the ramp, and we see that Guan's forces apparently are just arriving right here. There's tanks up ahead, really, really close. And Kuvira gives us, I suppose, our part explanation. Dr. Shang used some kind of magnetic technology to intensify the effects of the brainwashing. I don't know how to reverse it, but if we go back to Zaofu, then maybe I'm not going to abandon my friends to that madman. And Kuvira just says, understood. So, again, I like the intensity from Korra here that, I assume it's just found out that the brainwashing technology has been used on Asami, Mako, and Bolin, and that's why she's so intense about all of this. And it's due to some sort of magnetic technology, meaning that they don't, I suppose, have to capture people anymore, that they're able to just turn it into some sort of a brainwash ray or weapon. That's pretty much the only way that Asami, Mako, and Bolin could be brainwashed, you assume, but again, we don't know exactly how everything has happened. Maybe she, I don't know, it's hard to tell, because she could know at this point that they've been brainwashed, but she also might not know, but again, Kuvira mentions it here. But what are your thoughts on these 2 pages?
Yeah, no, I do wonder how they sort of know, but I don't know, it's really hard to tell sort of out of context here. But no, I think, the intensity of the situation, I think is definitely comes across really well. And this is something that, Korra wouldn't sort of back down on. So it's good to see her sort of hold her ground.
Last two preview pages, we see again this page, the stuff that happens in between here again, because like the situation has changed drastically. Like Korra seems to be nowhere to be seen, even though she was just there as Guan's forces were arriving. Su, Wei, and Wing do some metal bending and actually grab Mako, Bolin, and Asami in Earth Empire outfits with their metal ropes, but Guan uses his metal bending to snap it. He asks his troops to move in. This is when we get a really cool shot of Su, Toph, and Kuvira all doing the exact same earthbending move at the same time, and being so powerful that it just like sends the army flying, basically. So from a certain perspective, it's like, kind of three generations, kind of almost of like the same family, kind of, even though Kuvira is not related by blood, but you have the kind of mother-daughter connections across the line here, so it's pretty cool. What are your thoughts on this scene?
Yeah, no, this will be really cool when we get the full sort of sequence just to see how this battle actually goes down and if they're able to actually sort of get them. I'm feeling like they probably won't be able to get their friends just because of everything that's sort of happening here. But I mean, with the three of them, you would think that they would be almost more than a match for anything that really is trying to sort of go against them. So no, this is definitely one of the scenes that I'm really excited to see.
Yeah, like my biggest question from these last two pages is just like, is Korra just like out of shot in all of these panels, or has she actually gone somewhere? Because from the previous two pages, she's looking directly down the road at these exact forces arriving, yet she appears to not be present while it's all actually happening. And then, especially with like her friends being right there, you'd think she must have saw this, but where's she actually gone? It's kind of confusing, like about what exactly has happened. But do you have any thoughts on this? Do you think Korra is just in the background somewhere, not a focus of these particular panels, or what?
That's what I would think, unless she's like captured already, or if she's just dealing with the other forces. Because I mean, I assume he did bring sort of like a sizable force here. I'm sure there's a lot more going on.
Yeah, and I think this just makes me really, really excited for Ruins of the Empire Part 2, because of course they don't touch on like the direct Kuvira backstory or even the development that we were kind of waiting for right now, but we pretty much know that along the way there is going to be more on that Kuvira backstory when she was a child, so it's going to be interesting to see when they choose to kind of add that in, at what moments, and now that she's next to Sue, will they actually get their chance later on in the book to talk some more? And yeah, from the Part 3 cover we know that obviously the one of the big moments in Part 3 involves the rest of Team Avatar being brainwashed, so it's not solved in this part, but it is interesting to see them introduced as being brainwashed this early on in the book, because I assume this is probably maybe just past the halfway point in the book or something around there, so it is interesting that we're going to have like a pretty good amount of time with the crew as brainwashed. Yeah. So yeah, that's a look at pretty much all of the next three books coming out, and it's weird to kind of see them where like just there's very little excitement for Team Avatar Tales. The end of Imbalance, I think, has some people interested, but it's not the best book. And then Ruins of the Empire looks actually really, really good. So a kind of mixed kind of quality on the content right now. So still a lot of pressure on like upcoming announcements to announce some good books, but in general, like a lot of nice content overall here. So yeah, I'm definitely waiting to see what the next Avatar announcement is, but we've got some good books, and I do like that we have a few releases kind of all at once. But what are your thoughts on I suppose our next lineup of these kind of three books coming out over the next couple of weeks?
No, I mean, I think overall, I mean, there's clearly certain ones that we're sort of more interested in just because of, what they mean towards the series overall. Just as far as pushing the story forward versus ones that are obviously taking a while and just don't have a lot of sort of bearing on things. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's definitely cool that we're getting stuff in general, but for me personally, there's definitely ones that I'm really sort of interested in sort of getting, and other ones that I'm sort of probably I may not even get, or maybe just get it like digital for once. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I can see a lot of people, I think once proper reviews start coming out for Team Avatar Tales, probably making the decision that that really isn't the book that they need to pick up. Um, just because even the Lost Adventures, even though that has a lot more stories that are interesting, I think there's still an element of that book that doesn't interest a lot of people. So this may end up going down that road as well, and it kind of makes me kind of question, like, because I would like to see a collection of Korra short stories, but if they're not gonna make them on the better end of things, then I'm not really sure if that's necessarily something I want them to put a ton of time into. Because clearly, somewhere in production, Team Avatar Tales was a very difficult book to put together for whatever reason, because that's why it was delayed so long, apparently. Um, I think we talked in one of the previous podcasts about, I think, one of the editors, Rachel Roberts, mentioning stuff about when finally Team Avatar Tales went to printing, that, like, this book was a crazy journey that we learned a lot from and stuff like that. So something happened along the way with that book, and I really would like to know what it is, because that's probably the more interesting story with the book than the content itself. But yeah, I suppose there is another piece of news that's probably worth mentioning. I'm not going to claim that I know a lot about it because I don't really care too much about it, but there was what appeared to be our first like look at the Avatar Netflix show. In that it was like a VFX test or something like that. Now, the information on this thing changed a bunch of times. Like, someone posted it up at first, and everyone just thought like, "Oh, this is like early production stuff. Like, have they chosen actors already?" And people were really thinking that this was like just early stages of the final product. Then I think there was like some information that was confirmed, then it was deconfirmed, confirmed again, unconfirmed again. I think eventually what was settled on was that it was a VFX studio that either may or is likely working on the Avatar Netflix show. They, of their own accord, decided to do a kind of VFX test. So none of the costumes, actors, dialogue, or anything like that that was covered in these pictures had anything to do with the actual story content that we're going to see in the end of the road with the Netflix show. This was purely them doing something that kind of looked like Avatar to test some VFX stuff. So effectively, like, visually, there was more or less, I got the impression, nothing that you were really meant to take from it, just that it was some very early test stuff from a company working on the thing. Personally, I thought it didn't look that good, and it made The Last Airbender look really, really good. But I don't know. It was weird. I don't really know what is and is not correct information on it. I don't know, Greg. Did you even see any of this stuff going on?
No, no.
Yeah, because I think the moderators on Reddit, where it was mainly posted, I think did the right thing and kind of just took down the information while they were figuring out what was actually going on with it. And I think what ended up happening, I believe, was that Netflix were getting worried about the fact that, wait, people are thinking that this is the first information on the show when it has like barely anything to do with it. Take it down so it doesn't like ruin the reputation effectively of the show. So I think there was a lot of that stuff going on, and that's why it's probably difficult to find at this point. I I could have done like a YouTube video on it, but honestly, like, I looked at it and I was just like, I don't have anything to say about this. This is just like pretty bad looking test shots, and I don't really know what to make of it, so I didn't really say much on it. So my lack of interest in the overall project, I think, helped me there not to spread misinformation. But yeah, so I don't know. They're at the point with that show where they probably should start saying a little bit more about it, where they are, what exactly they're working on, so stuff like this doesn't happen as more progress is being made towards the show. Because you're going to have these situations, which obviously Netflix doesn't want, so you'd maybe want them to start talking about it. Because I don't know, like, is it meant to be next year that we actually see some of this, or is it 2021?
That's a good question. I don't know. Next year seems like that would still be possibly kind of early, considering what they've said that they're, how far they're along so far. So I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see anything next year, really.
Yeah, so yeah, this is likely 2021, but a lot of fans seem to want to know about this because it was spread around a little bit. Because obviously, like, I think like 2 or 3 of the few comments we've had about the show from Mike O'Brien have literally been, "Stop asking us when our auditions are going to take place. We'll let you know
Yeah.
when we're at that stage." So, it still seems like they're very, very, very early in production, and yeah, this was probably not the first kind of big news thing that they wanted to come out about it, but yeah, it's probably still up there if you want to look for it. The images are probably saved somewhere, but it doesn't look overly impressive to me, what they had there. But like I explained, I think it was just a VFX studio deciding, well, let's get a basic idea of the look, so dress some characters up like Avatar characters, kind of, not official costumes, not official actors, and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much all the news that we have right now. So the next podcast will, I don't know, depending on if there's any other news, the next podcast will likely be actually a lot of stuff's going to happen at once. So because like New York Comic Con is going to happen. At that point, both Team Avatar Tales and Imbalance Part 3 are going to be out. So the next podcast will probably be it'll likely be the Imbalance review, but again, I'm not really sure exactly how it will all work out. In that, like, if Team Avatar Tales really has nothing to it, we might actually just review those books on like the same podcast. And so on, especially if there's no news at a New York Comic Con, it could be easy to just cover those 3 topics in one. But yeah, it'll probably be early October, the next podcast that you'll see once the books actually start to come out. But yeah, that's been episode 205 of the Avatar Online podcast. It's been myself and Greg. Thanks for listening, and bye.
Bye bye.